Amusing Ourselves to Death by Neil Postman, a very thought provoking book about the relationship between electronic media, specifically television, and culture, and the potentially deleterious effects which the one may be said to have had upon the other. So, Neil Postman, if you don't know, was, I believe, an educator and social commentator who was notable for being a pretty vehement critic of television. Such criticism is what forms the content of this book. The main argument of this book, I think, could be pretty succinctly summarized by saying that electronic media, in particular television, has had severely adverse effects upon our mentality as people and our collective society. Now, Neil Postman is certainly not the only person to have ever criticized the medium of television, but what sets this book apart, perhaps, from other criticisms is that it is very deep and very incisive in its analysis. So, Postman asserts in this book that television, by its very epistemological nature, is unsuitable for serious, rational civil discourse. That television is suited for entertainment and only entertainment. That the effect that television has when it tries to deal with subject matter that is not for entertainment purposes is to effectively trivialize that subject matter. And this includes such things as news reporting, politics, and religion as well. Postman asserts, contrarily, that the prime era, the heyday, if you will, of serious, rational civil discourse was what he would denote as the typographic era, which I believe he would denote as being roughly from the mid 18th to the mid 19th century, before the emergence of like pictorial advertising, that is mass reproducible images, and telegraphy, transmittable sound, because that's effectively what television is. It is a merge of image and sound. That's what television is. So in the late 19th century, with the development of, again, mass reproducible images, which were eventually used in like advertising, and the development of telegraphy, the typographic era, which Postman would aver was the prime era for serious rational civil discourse, eventually gave way to the era of electronic media, now the era of primarily television. So Postman points out the disparity between the ways in which people nowadays engage with issues of their time and the way that people of the past, of the typographic era, engaged with issues of their time. This book, I should say, came out, I believe, in 1985. So he refers to like the debates between Reagan and Carter, the presidential debates, and he contrasts this with the debates between Lincoln and Douglas in the 1800s. And it's just a pretty night and day comparison, because political debates in the 1800s were affairs which could go on for hours. Like the Lincoln Douglas debates went on for like 7-8 hours. But people turned out for that. People were engaged with that. They were invested in that. Whereas, contrarily, modern political debates usually are like 90 minutes, a minute or two per question, and maybe a minute or so for a rebuttal or response. That's pretty much it. And again, Postman would posit that this is just a precipitous drop off, because the attention span of the modern citizen is much, much shorter than that of their forebears. But also, Postman shows how, because television is so imagistic, that it effectively promotes image over words, over rhetoric. Because in the typographic era, before the emergence of mass reproducible images, people would likely not even have recognized Lincoln if he had walked down the street, because they wouldn't have had access to his picture. They would have only had access to his words. And so words carried so much more weight in that era than they do now. And because television is again so imagistic, image is often more powerful than words. And like with Reagan and Carter, Reagan, was very charming and handsome, and that played well for the cameras. Whereas with like the debate, the first televised presidential debate, I think it was the first between Kennedy and Nixon. Kennedy was himself very charming and handsome, played well for the cameras, whereas Nixon kind of looked like a walking corpse and very awkward on camera. And he himself said that killed his first presidential run. Uh, and Postman points out in this book that such presidents as like William Howard Taft, who was like morbidly obese, would not be able to succeed in the era of television, of televised politics, because their image just doesn't fit. It just does not play well for the camera. But that's one thing that he points out in this book, which is again very, I think, perhaps revelatory, is how television has changed the emphasis when it comes to serious, rational civil discourse from well thought out, eloquent rhetoric and forceful reasoning to charm and image. But he also talks about like newscasting, television newscasting, and he has very negative things to say about that as well, because one of the effects that Postman says that television has had upon our world is that it kind of gluts us with information, whereas in the typographic era, information, by the very nature of print media, information had to be much more coherently presented than in pictorial format. It had to be much more of like a coherent narrative, whereas news today, like television news today, is very chaotic when you think about it. And he points out the phenomenon of what he refers to as now this. Because like if you watch television news, the newscasters, the anchor people will often say like, now on to this, now this, here's sports, now for the weather. And what Postman points out is that this effectively denotes a complete absence of coherence between the items that you're taking in. It has no coherence. It's just, again, a barrage of data which is very chaotic, and again has no real, one thing has no real bearing on another, and that this again has adverse effects on the mind of the viewer, even if they don't really recognize it. But beyond that, Postman also talks about what effects television has had upon religion, and this I found pretty interesting. Postman contrasts like televangelism of the modern day with like Jimmy Swaggart and Pat Robertson and stuff like that, with the evangelists of the typographic era. And again, it's just night and day, because the sermons of the typographic era were often quite eloquent, with very vigorous rhetoric behind them, involved in them. Whereas it probably goes without saying, televangelism in the modern world is often shameful, disgraceful, which often utilizes stunts and like effectively show business tactics in the services. Again, it's just a decline in quality from the typographic era to the television era. And I will say this for this book: this is a great rebuttal, I would say, to the notion of what I believe is called the Whig theory of history, that history is a just a constant upward slant of progress, that things just constantly get better and better technologically, perhaps, but in terms of culture and like reasoning capability. This book, if this book perhaps more than any other illustrates that that is absolutely not the case, because we have effectively dumbed ourselves down by the media through which we consume our information, because it is not only does it demand less of us, but its emphasis is on entertainment and not on reasoning or logic. Uh, so uh, Beyond just that, Postman also kind of presents this book as an endorsement of the sociological predictions of Aldous Huxley over those of George Orwell, because um, Brave New World in 1984 were two books which presented differing visions of dystopia. And with this book, Postman essentially argues that for the Western world at least, Orwell got it wrong and Huxley got it right, that television is, in essence, our soma. Soma being in Brave New World, the drug which is used to narcotize the populace. Television is our soma, Postman would aver, because it's not only is it less demanding than print media, but its emphasis is such that it again is it serves to make a spectacle and entertainment of everything, whether that be politics or news or religion. It cheapens things. It has trivialized everything, and it has dumbed us down as a people. Uh, so that is essentially the subject matter, as best as I can give it, of amusing ourselves to death. This book was, again, a very thought-provoking book, even if you may not agree with everything that Postman says, because what Postman says, which makes this book much more hard line than some other criticisms that you might see perhaps of television, is that television is basically it's irredeemable. It cannot be amended or rehabilitated into anything that isn't harmful to society, except as entertainment. Like Postman is okay with television as entertainment, like a movie, a television show. He doesn't have any problem with that. His problems are when television tries to do things other than entertainment, such as religion, politics, news, and also education, because he talks about how like Sesame Street is such a phenomenon now, that television has altered the ways that we educate our children, and not for the better, Postman would say. But Postman's, like, one of his main arguments here is that television is harmful by its very nature, that it cannot be rehabilitated. That its very epistemological foundation is such that it's geared only towards entertainment, and that it will trivialize whatever it deals with. So you might not agree with that. I don't know how much I would agree with that myself. I don't know that I would say that there is no saving grace of television as a legitimate means of communication and civil discourse. I don't know that I would go quite that far, but I do think that he presents a remarkably strong case for his thesis that television, in its popular format at least, as we typically conceive of it, is pretty nascent, you might say. But beyond just that, since this book has been written, I mean, television has given way to, the internet, TikTok. Oh, good heavens! That the attention span of the average citizen in 1985, it was, just so much more than it is now with like TikTok, where you have kids nowadays with like 5-second attention spans, the attention span of a goldfish, basically. We've come a long way since this book was written, but probably not a long way in the right direction. I think we've gotten worse, perhaps you might say, since Amusing Ourselves to Death was published. But yeah, that is the book as best I can present it. I'm not going to rate this book because I generally don't with books like this, but I will say whether or not you agree or disagree with it, it is um, incredibly thought provoking. It's very stimulating, and it will perhaps give you a different perspective on the boob tube because we watch television every day pretty much by and large, and we probably don't even think that much about what we're taking in or about the nature of the information that we're taking in, what it does and what it doesn't do, and what it makes us do and what it makes us not do. This book is very incisive in its analysis of this issue. And so, whether or not you agree or disagree with it, I think this book is immensely valuable. So, while I won't rate it, I could recommend it because I think a lot of people do stand to gain something from reading it. So, Amusing Ourselves to Death by Neil Postman. Have you read it? If you have, let me know down in the comments what you thought about it. And if you haven't read it, like I say, I could definitely recommend this because I think it is a valuable book at the very least. And as always, if you have enjoyed anything you've seen or heard here today, remember to hit that like button and subscribe. I would really appreciate it. And until next time, peace.